You're someone with a vision for your practice, for your side hustle, and for your personal journey. But when it comes to establishing your path on how to get to where you want to be with your practice, things get a little messy. You're also someone who'd prefer to go in person instead of to groups and listening to everyone else's story. To me, it sounds like you could benefit from one-on-one consulting with our experienced practice of the practice consultants. From $5.95 a month and up, you can work with a consultant that will give you more direction and practical tried and tested tips matched to you and your goals. For more information, visit practiceofthepractice.com/apply. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/apply. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1259. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. I am so excited to be hanging out with you here today. We help people on this show to be able to build a private practice that thrives and is doing well, that they absolutely love. We want both sides of that. We want it to thrive. We want to know the operational side. We want good planning. And we don't want to just see any client that we think needs help. We want to actually love the work that we do. We want to be able to be in markets or in the way that we're doing our work in a way that we absolutely love. There's so many times in my practice before I sold that in 2019 that I just was like, I can't believe this is what I get to show up and do. My whole narrative as a child was, work for someone else and they'll give you a raise and then you retire with a pension. Both my parents worked for the school system. My dad was a school psychologist. My mom was a school nurse. And so that narrative was really strong that, you need to go find a good job. You need to get good grades and someone else will bless you with a good salary and good benefits. Now that worked for the boomer generation. I wouldn't say it's working as well for Gen Xers like myself or millennials. So a lot of us jumped into the entrepreneurial world. And for me, initially, that was just to pay off student loan debt. And I remember the moment I was talking to my friend Ian, and he had done a bunch of business planning. He was this guy that you all probably had this friend in college that he started a sub business when we were in college. I'm like, dude, everyone else is working as a waiter and how do you start a business in college? And he just kept doing business after business. And I said, hey, I am thinking about doing this thing called mental wellness counseling. And I've heard you need a business plan. Help me out with that business plan. And he just said, well, there's one book that I start with, and that's Business Plan Generation. And so I read that book. It gave me a few tips that sent me in the right direction. But literally since that moment, I don't think I looked or thought about a business plan. And so from when I started that practice in 2006 until I sold it in 2019 was I'd hear a podcast, I'd hear some tips, I'd say, okay, I guess I should set KPIs, some key performance indicators, and we should figure out how many sessions we want to do. We should talk about all sorts of just different things in the practice. I guess we should have some team meetings. There wasn't a cohesive plan. And whenever I had done planning at nonprofits or at the community college, we would spend days building out this plan only to have it just be in a drawer for the whole year. So my entire thought around business planning, around nonprofit planning was you spend all this time making a plan, you put it in a drawer, and you never go back to it. I'm guessing today's guest might help me think a little bit differently about that. I am so excited to have Dave Lavinsky with me. Dave is a serial entrepreneur with over 30 years experience starting and growing companies. His key area of expertise is in business planning. He's helped over 1 million entrepreneurs and business owners create business plans to raise capital and start and grow their businesses. Dave, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. Thanks
for having me here, Joe. Great. My pleasure.
Yeah. So how many people make a business plan, just put it in a drawer, leave it on their computer and never look at it? Is that a common thing or am I an outlier there?
It is a very common thing. Most people, most entrepreneurs, therapists, private practice people create business plans at the beginning, a lot of times because they need to, because you need a loan. So that's the most common reason why someone needs a business plan. The bank says, I need to see your plan before I'm going to give you money, and that's why I need a business plan. So most of those cases, they create the business plan just as sort of an application to give to the bank. They get their money, and then yes, they put it in the drawer, never look at it again. And for some people that's okay, but for most, they're not going to reach the goals, and they're not going to attain or achieve the vision that they set out at the beginning
Mm-hmm.
because they're not following a plan.
Yeah. So let's start with what do people do wrong when it comes to business planning? Like, there's got to be kind of the top things you see helping over 1 million different businesses. I mean, that's insane. Let's just start with well done, sir. But like, what do you see people do wrong when it comes to thinking about the plan for their business?
Well, the first thing they do wrong is not creating the plan in the first place. So particularly, if you don't need to raise capital, most people don't create a business plan. So let's talk about creating a business plan, if we can, for starting your own private practice. And the first thing that I think is really important is just the financial model part of it, which is to say, okay, hey, what does this look like financially? So let's say I'm going to charge, $100 an hour, and I'm going to see, so if you charge $100 an hour, and that's your revenue, and let's say you're look at your expenses, and you say, well, I can only work, 8 hours a day, and then there's time in between. So you got to look at, your revenue, but then look at, based on that revenue and other expenses, well, how much can you afford for rent? And that's like usually one of the big factors, one of the big expenses is rent. And if you're not planning this out properly, all of your profits is going to go to rent. You're essentially working for your landlord, and that's not why you went into, start your practice in the first place. So I think the first thing is you really need to look at the financials to understand, well, okay, this is what the financials look like. Hey, maybe I can't charge $100 an hour. I have to charge $125 an hour. Or maybe I can't afford $1,500 a month rent. I can only afford $700 a month rent. So you got to look at these factors. Or likewise, how much can you spend for a marketing expense? Somebody asks you, hey, I want you to sponsor this. And, a lot of people make those decisions off the cuff and they don't really think about it and think it through. The business plan, a core part of the business plan is that financial model, the financial projections to understand the numbers. And I know that a lot of people go into private practice to help patients, and that's great. But also, you need to make sure that you're profitable. You need to make sure you're not losing money. You need to make sure that you can pay your own mortgage and your own personal expenses as well. So I think that a big mistake that people make in not creating the business plan is not understanding the financials, which affects, what type of office space you can rent in terms of the lease amount, affects how much you're going to charge, the type of website that you want to build. Well, how much can you afford to spend on a web developer? How much can you afford to spend on your monthly expenses? So that's the first thing that we want to make sure that is covered in the business plan, to make sure that you're at least break even if you consider your salary in your expenses.
Yeah. So looking at just all the things that it takes to do, the rule we typically give, and would love to hear your feedback on this, is, if we say about 40% of your revenue should be going towards your clinical staff. And so they're getting
Mhm.
as their salary to be well paid about 40%. About 30% or so should be going to all of your expenses. So that's rent, any admin, your, progress note system, your billing, all of that. And then hopefully somewhere between 25 and 30% is your overall profit. And that's not counting you as a clinician. If you're a clinician, that should be coming out of that 40%.
The
A lot
staffing.
of owners, they might not be doing a full 25-hour, caseload as they start to grow their group practice. Do those numbers line up with what you're seeing in most of the private practice industry?
It does. I think 30% is 30% profit margin would be a great goal. I think that's a goal. I think obviously there can be some above that. I think many below that. In
Yeah.
actuality, I think it's a very good goal. But a lot of times those expenses and staffing do increase quite a bit. But I think that's a good way to. I think it's a good structure to strive for.
hmm And I do think there's also probably periods of time when it's like, hey, we want to put an extra $2,000 a month into pay-per-click ads. It might be a gamble. We might lose that money, but hopefully we, get a handful of clients out of it. Or we want to hire an admin to take this off of the owner's plate. And so, yeah, we're going to take 15% instead of 30%. And so putting in. So you said, the financials first. What's second?
So one of the questions that I think is a very important question to answer in your business plan is, why am I uniquely qualified to succeed? And being the best therapist in your field that's a great answer. On the other hand, being a great marketer is also a great answer. And I think a lot of people may not want to hear that, because not always the best product or service wins. A lot of times the best marketer wins. Now, this being said, in the therapist world, if you're a great marketer but a terrible therapist, that will quickly come out and you will
Yeah.
lose any repeat clients. But why are you uniquely qualified to succeed is a very important question. So maybe it's, I'm a great therapist. I have a great training program. So I have a great way to train the other therapists. So we're going to provide the absolute best service. Another thing could be, hey, in this area, there are, there's a gap here. There's no one providing this type of therapy, within 15 miles of here. So there's a lot of different reasons why you could be uniquely qualified to succeed. But it's important to just think about it and think about, well, here's where I stand now, but wouldn't it be cool if there were more reasons? And then you build those reasons. So, for example, build that training program where you're going to train other therapists. Hey, we're going to have the best equipment. Well, great. An area where you can be uniquely qualified to succeed. We're going to be the only therapy firm in this area that has this equipment, but that then has to be built into the financial model. Hey, we're going to spend X dollars on this equipment, and that's going to give us a unique success factor. But now we need to make sure we take that into account in raising capital or looking at our financial model. So I think it's a very, very important question to ask. And once again, being the best that in your field, that's a quality answer. But I want you to think more and more, because if nobody can compete with you, you're going to be successful.
Mhm.
Period.
Yeah, so it sounds like really finding those areas that no one else is in or very few people are in. I remember at the beginning of my private practice career read Guerrilla Marketing, and in that, I think it's Tim Levinson, maybe if I'm remembering his name correctly.
Yep, sounds right.
Um, he talked about tires and how tires used to all be the same size, and then one tire company had different treads, and so they were like the best off-road tire. And then one added just a millimeter more of rubber, and they were like the longest lasting tire. And just like where are those blue oceans where no one's competing? When we first started this podcast, there were no podcasts about the business of private practice, and so it was like, okay, there were lots of blogs, there was lots of YouTube channels, people had written books, but no one was podcasting about it. And so like day one, we were the number one podcast for counselors in private practice. And so finding those areas and spending that time to look around, and for me, even just interviewing, people you find on Psychology Today and saying, hey, like, who do you refer out to a ton? Like what are you looking for? What are you craving? Asking attorneys or asking, like pastors or whatever. Like, what do you struggle? Do you struggle to have post-affair therapists that can help couples
Mm.
navigate that? Well, that might be an area that you want to focus on.
Yep.
Cool. So we got financial model and how am I uniquely qualified? What's next?
Well, I want to see a market demand.
Mm,
So, if you look at a business plan structure, we start with the company analysis, which really talks about who you are, what your background is, and what you're doing, and then we quickly move into the industry analysis and the customer analysis. So when we look at the industry analysis, we're trying to see, how big is demand in your geographic region for the services that you're going to provide. So if it's marriage counseling, you can actually go online and do some research and find out how big the market is for marriage counseling. But then, as we talked about before briefly, the competitive analysis section talks about, are there 800 marriage therapists in your location, in which case there's no way you can be successful, even if the market's big, if there's just way too much competition. So I really want to understand the market, and is there market demand, right?
mm,
If there's no market demand, you can be the best therapist in the world for kids who are grieving the loss of a turtle, but that market's probably pretty small.
mhm,
So we don't want to go start a business like that, start a practice like that. So I really want to understand the market demand. And yes, there's, go online, see, hey, the marriage counseling market is this big, and our town represents X percent of the United States market, and you could sort of extrapolate the size of the market, in your town. You could also talk to people, talk to other people in business, find out where there's demand, where are other counselors and therapists turning patients away, where's there, a wait list. That's wait lists are the greatest. That means that there is, more demand than the current market can fill. So I love to see demand. And so I really want to make sure that the market's big enough. And then the next part of a business plan is that customer analysis, which is understanding who your specific customer is that you're targeting. Are you targeting, anyone who's married? Are you targeting people that are having this type of issue or this type of issue? Are you targeting certain ages, certain areas of affluence, whether they live here or there, and how much money they have. So there's all types of ways to break up those customer segments. And I just want you to think through that. Who is our target customer? Because the better you can define and understand your customer, the better you're going to be able to market to them to get them, and better you're able to serve them. And so for marketing, it's just really understanding where those customers are. Are they on social media? Should you be participating in social media to generate awareness? Should you sponsor a local Little League team? Just figuring out where those customers are is really, really important. So I think the next show is we have, summarizing, looking, make sure there's market demand and making sure you really understand who the clientele are or the customers are that you're serving.
Are there any tools that can be really helpful with evaluating that tools you really like or tools that you think are overrated, whether it's Chat GPT or whether it's like Google Trends or anything like that you'd say, yeah, definitely use those tools in addition, like census data? Like what are things that people should use in addition to just kind of interviewing and guessing and doing Google searches?
Well, I think ChatGPT is actually very good at market sizes. So what they're doing a lot of times is there's a company called Ibis World, which is a very large market research company, and there's many others like that, and they'll publish a report on the size of the marriage counseling business in the United States, and their report will cost $1,000 and it'll be 100 pages, but on their sales page, they'll always give an overview of the size is this and the trend is this. They'll give a few bullets, and ChatGPT has already sort of read that, pulled that in, and and that source and a couple other sources. So ChatGPT will actually do a pretty good job in general on market sizes. Google Trends is also a very good tool because that's even more specific. If you can look at marriage counseling, they'll tell top cities, which may not be helpful unless it's your city, but you'll see trends. Hey, is this market growing or decreasing over time? And actually on that, like business planning, it's actually gone down over the last 20 years in time. And then during COVID, it went back up a little bit, then it came back down. So it's good to see in Google Trends what's going on in your market to make sure that the market is at least flat and not decreasing. We just really don't want to see a decreasing market.
Yeah, and to see if there are certain trends in certain times of the year, even that people are searching for certain things. As a therapist, I can tell you from experience that having the right EHR is an absolute lifeline. I recommend using Therapy Notes. They make billing, scheduling, note-taking, telehealth, and e-prescribe incredibly easy. Best of all, they offer live telephone support that's available 7 days a week. You don't have to take my word for it. Do your own research and see for yourself. Therapy Notes is the #1 highest rated EHR system available today, with a 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com and on Google. All you have to do is click the link below or type promo code Joe on their website over at therapynotes.com and receive a special 2-month trial absolutely free. Again, that's therapynotes.com and use promo code Joe on the website. If you're coming from another EHR, Therapy Notes will also import your demographic data quick and easy at no cost, so you can get started right away. Trust me, don't waste any more of your time and try Therapy Notes. Just use promo code Joe at checkout. Awesome. So once we do that kind of market demand, kind of what are some of the next steps in our business planning?
Well, next step is, so we talked about company, customer analysis, market or industry analysis, then competition. So I want you to look at who your competitors are, what are they charging, and that's a very important thing. I'm not saying that if all your competitors charge $125 an hour, that's what you need to charge, but it's important to understand that. Do they accept this insurance or that insurance? So it's important to understand who your competitors are, what they're good at, and what they're bad at. And a lot of people starting businesses think, oh, their competitors are terrible. They're terrible. They're terrible. They're not terrible. If they were terrible, they'd be out of business. There's at least something they're doing well. So it's important to understand that. What are they doing well? So don't just look at the negative. Look at what they're doing well. Clearly they're satisfying some clients. Look at their websites, look at their customer testimonials, look at who they're serving, look at their prices, and understand that you're competing in this competitive environment. And maybe you're 10 times better than them, and if so, that's great, but you're still competing with them. And that goes back to what I said earlier. A lot of times the best marketer wins. So even though you may be a better therapist, better counselor than they are, if they have a lot of clients and they're doing a good enough job, a lot of their clients are not going to switch. So it's important to understand who your competitors are, what they're good at, what they're not so good at, what their pricing is, so you can figure out what your niche is going to be.
Mm, awesome. So we're looking at all that. Where do we go from there?
So next section of business plan is your marketing plan. So we talk about the marketing plan. We talk about the what's known as the 4 Ps. So the first P is product. In your case, is the service, product or service. So first P, product service, is really defining what services that you're offering. So really thinking about, okay, in some cases it may be very simple, but in other cases you may have a whole different list of services that you want to map out on your website and have different prices for and different fees for. So you're mapping out your services. So we want to really document what your services are. The second P is price, which you just talked about briefly, which is figuring out what your price, fee, your fee schedule is and what you're charging for different services. And you may have a sliding scale, which is great, but you need to really define your prices. The next P is the one I'll skip over quickly is P stands for, actually, no, I won't skip over it. Place, which is very important. Where are you going to be located? And that's important. Are you going to be located if you're in a town of X thousand? You're loaded on the if you're loaded, if you're located on the outskirts of town in one direction, you might be alienating yourself from people living on the other side of town. So that place is a very important consideration, particularly when you're launching your business or if you're expanding and you grow out of your current place. You need to think about the location is very important. And the final P is promotions. How are new clients going to learn about you? Are you going to you mentioned, Joe, pay-per-click advertising? Are you going to do social media posting? Are you going to sponsor local events? Referrals is a great way to do it. You're going to talk to other therapists and counselors and get your name out there. You're going to talk to MDs, etc. So those are the 4 Ps of marketing. Product, which in this case is mostly service, product, service, price, place, and promotions. You need to really think through that. And once again, the value of a business plan is forcing you to write that down. And I'm not saying it has to be the most polished business plan in the world. And use your phone and voice type if you want, if it's faster, and just say what the answers are. Because what I can nearly guarantee is when you go through these exercises and answer all these questions, and you have them down on paper and you print it out and you read it, I'm sure you're going to make some modifications. You're going to say, this sounded good when I first said, but this. Actually, I think we should do this. So the fact is, when you have it down on paper, it forces you to say, hey, this is actually not exactly the way I want to do it. I want to do something differently. And if you don't have that, don't go through that process, you're going to do it. You're going to build your practice in an optimal way, and
Mm,
not the way that you really wanted to, not the way you envisioned when you launched.
mm. Love that. So product, price, place, promotions.
Correct.
Um, After the marketing, where's our plan go?
So after marketing is the operations plan. And the operations plan, I like to split into 2 pieces. First piece is operational processes. What do I need for my practice to run? So what needs to be done on a daily basis? And maybe some of this can be taken care of with technology, sort of like scheduling. Like, who's going to do the scheduling? Is it an online calendar, which is probably the easiest, or do I need to hire a receptionist? Do I need to make sure the receptionist is doing his or her job properly? So I need to understand the processes. Do I have supplies I need to purchase on a regular basis? Am I going to purchase those supplies? Is somebody else going to purchase those supplies? So think about all the processes that are required to run your type of therapy or counseling practice, and document those and figure, well, are you going to do all those? Is someone else going to do it? How are you going to make sure those processes get done on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis? So that's the first thing in operations, is the operational processes. The second thing is operational milestones, which is particularly when you launch a practice, or even if you're in practice right now, my guess is and my hope is that you have bigger goals, right? So you have bigger goals. If you're serving 100 clients now, maybe you're happy. If you're happy, great. You're doing a great job. If you're thrilled with how your practice exists today, you're doing a great job. Keep doing the same thing, and you're great. But if not, if you have bigger goals, or particularly if you're starting a practice, I want you to document what those goals are. Where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want your practice to be in 5 years, or 10 years, or even more? But I like to start, in a business plan, we usually think 5 years. So where do I want my practice to be in 5 years? So let's say I'm starting out now, I have 0 clients. Or let's say I'm a year into it and I have 40 clients. Well, where do I want to be in 5 years? Maybe I want to have 100 clients. Maybe I want to have 200 clients. Maybe I want to have 1,000 clients. Okay, let's take 1,000 clients. So if we have 1,000 clients, then I want you to think through, well, what do we need? Where do we need to be in 4 years, in 3 years, in 2 years, in 1 year? So even if the easiest way is to think linearly, which it never businesses don't run linearly, but if we want to get to 1,000 clients in 5 years, I can bet you we're not going to go from zero. We're not going to go from 100 in 4 years to 1,000, right? It's going to be a path. So basically, if we want to be at 1,000 clients in 5 years, we probably need to be at 400, at 800 in 4 years, and working back 200 at the end of the first year. So what do we need to do to get there? What type of marketing resources do we need? What type of hiring do we need? Right? So if we want to get to 1,000, in that time period, we need to hire 4 other therapists. So what I like to do is say here's where we need to be in 5 years. What do we need to accomplish in the next 12 months to put us on the trajectory to hitting that 5-year goal? So to think about, okay, this year will be successful if we get up to 200 clients, we launch our second location, we hire these 3 people, etc. So you think of those, and those are what I call asset goals. These are assets that you want to build, which are processes, operations, hires, locations versus metrics goals. You talked about KPIs earlier. Metrics goals would be, number of clients is a metric goal as well. That's also an asset, but metrics would be, I want to reach $200,000 in sales. That's more of a KPI metric goal. Or I want, when I survey my clients after sessions, I want a net promoter score that of 8 or above, where they say they love me and I'm doing a great job. So those are more KPIs and metrics, but I want asset goals. So if we want to get to 1,000 clients, at some point, we need to get to 800 clients. At some point, we need to launch a second location. At some point, we need to hire these X people. At some point, we need to do this and that. I want you to think about that. Things just don't magically happen. That's why I'm a big fan of thinking a little longer term. Where do we want to go? And then what do I need to accomplish to put us on the trajectory to hitting that goal?
So organized. I love it. What do we do after the operation plan? Is there more to it, or is that pretty much wrapping up the overall?
There's
kind of
one
big
last
picture?
there's one last thing. We already covered financials. The one missing thing we haven't talked about is the management team. Now, the management team could just be you, and if so, that's great. If it's you're a solo practitioner doing your thing, that's fantastic. But a lot of times you need other people, and maybe they're not on your management team. Maybe they're not, your peer where you're talking to them about strategy, but maybe they're people that work for you and they're more your team. But you need to think about, who do we need to hire? And part of that could be, hey, we need to do marketing, and that's not my area of expertise, and we'll outsource that. And that's still part of your team. That's your outsourced team. We're going to outsource marketing to an individual we found on Upwork, or a local firm, or a national firm. That's part of your team. You need to think through what other team members you need. We talked about, do you need, a receptionist? Do you need other practitioners? What else? Do you need someone to come in and clean, a cleaning firm? I know that's sort of a basic thing, but I want to think about the human resources that are required for you to get on that trajectory to hitting your goals. So that management team is really the final piece of the puzzle. And that management team then goes into the financial model we talked about at the beginning, which is, well, how much is it going to cost? I'd love to hire, this therapist to join practice, but if they're going to cost, $200,000 a year, that may or may not work for how much we charge. So you need to, everything needs to go back into that financial model. How much we're spending for marketing, each of these pieces, what our prices are, goes back in the financial model to make sure that it's feasible the way we're thinking of the business. Because the worst thing in the world is launching a business and spending your life and the opportunity cost of doing that, and particularly if you're doing great work and helping people, but you go out of business because you're losing money. and you can't make it work. So that we're trying to avoid at all costs.
So awesome. Dave, I mean, this is amazing. It's so helpful to just have you walk through all of this. If every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
I'd want them to know that there is value to having a written business plan, right? It's value to having it written down and making sure that your financial model makes sense. That if you do the things that you set out, that you are going to make money or at least pay for the salary that you feel is appropriate for what you're doing. So that's the most important thing is get that down to paper. I don't care if you just take notes from what we just talked about and write down all the sections on pen and paper, and it's 2 pieces of paper. I'm good with that. That's good enough. You're better than 95% of people if you do that. So that's the bare minimum. Write it down, sleep on it, wake up the next day, read it, and say, is this right? Does this make sense? Am I excited about this? Does everything look good? Then great. But if not, think through it. What do we need? What else do we need to do to make us uniquely qualified to succeed? What customers should we really focus on? It's going to help you fine tune your practice so it's more successful.
So awesome. I'm so inspired by this. Dave, if people want to connect with you, if they want to follow your work, where should we send them?
Sure. The main place is Plan Pros. So planpros.ai, it's our AI powered business plan software. So what that does, it basically takes you through the questions a lot of the questions I just mentioned. You submit your answers. It probably takes you 15 minutes to do. And then what it does is uses AI to figure out market sizes, market trends, all that work. Also, it will, based on all the information you input, will create that financial model for you to make sure that it's going to be profitable. So if you're, and you can look at scenario planning. Hey, if we spend $1,000 a month on rent, here's the result. If we spend $1,200 a month on rent, here's the result. And I think it's very important. So best way to find me is planpros.ai, where you can create, there's a lot more business plan articles, and then there's software to allow you to create your business plan.
So awesome. Well, Dave, thank you so much for being on the show today.
My pleasure, Joe. Thanks for having me.
What an awesome episode. Man, I have a couple pages of notes here. So we've got the financial model, then why am I uniquely qualified to succeed, market demand, looking at the industries, marketing 4Ps of product, price, place, promotions, operations plan, and then management team. For me, I think my big takeaway, beyond just the notes, is to even though we've been around since 2012 with Practice the Practice, to step back and say, like, are we doing what we want to be doing? Look at all these different areas and strategically think as the owner, as the founder, but then also with my management team. We've continued to grow to really look at each department and take the podcasting department to look at our cost per episode, look at our sponsorships, look at if we were to grow by 20% next year in just the podcast department, like, would we need another staff member? Would we need more marketing? Would we want to promote this through pay-per-click or through other things? So just to think more strategically about, like, what is kind of each department's focus, what are the projects within that, and to take a little more time to just break that down. I don't know about you as a listener, but sometimes I get excited by big ideas and by shiny objects, and I have to rein it in. And having something written down saying, here's what we're going to work on this year, allows me also to say, we're not going to work on these things. We're going to put those in the kind of idea spot that we'll come back to and see if Joe is still interested in that in a few months. Otherwise, we're going to stay on this one course or these 2 courses that we planned. So a lot of great things today. We also couldn't do this show without amazing sponsors like Therapy Notes. Therapy Notes is the best electronic health records out there. They will help you switch over from your current EHR. They also give you 2 months for free or just money off if you use promo code Joe at checkout. They are phenomenal. They help with automated billing. It's going to make it easier to outsource your billing. So many reasons to switch to Therapy Notes. Just head on over to therapynotes.com, read about it, and at checkout, just use promo code Joe. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.